Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has just announced plans for a new high-speed rail line. This project is called Alto. The trains will connect Quebec City and Toronto with stops in Trois-Rivières, Laval, Montreal, Ottawa and Peterborough. They will reach speeds of 300 kilometers an hour, and there will be 3 phases to the project. And the first one will cost $3.9 billion. Trudeau calls it, quote, a nation-building project.
A reliable, efficient, high-speed rail network will be a game changer for Canadians, slashing travel times by half, getting you from Toronto to Montreal in 3 hours. It'll stimulate our economy, strengthen the bonds between cities and our 2 most populous provinces, and reduce costs for businesses while improving their productivity and competitiveness.
And the CBC's Janice McGregor was listening into that announcement. She joins us now from the nation's capital. Hey, Janice. So a high-speed rail line going from Toronto to Quebec City has actually been discussed for years. Tell us a little bit more about this latest announcement and why it's happening now.
And we've known since October that the Trudeau government did intend to proceed with a high-speed rail plan as opposed to high-frequency rail, which was something they considered, trains that would just run more often at a slightly lower speed on a different route than the via train system that we have in Canada at this moment. They are going all the way with the high-speed option. They are doing this in the form of a public-private partnership, a PPP. We learned today that they have not signed the contract for this yet, but apparently coming, depending on who was talking, within days or within weeks here. The timing on that politically is kind of interesting, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But the winning bidder, and there was a process here where 3 major groups kind of shortlisted for this. They had to, by the end of the summer, or midsummer, I believe, submit different options. The government has now gone with the Cadence proposal. That is the group that was working with a partner affiliated with high-speed rail in France. Also, the company that sort of the previous SNC-Lavalin. Also interesting about this bid, this consortium that was picked has involvement with Air Canada, which raised some eyebrows, given that if we eventually do have an efficient high-speed rail system in this country, that would presumably eat Air Canada's lunch in terms of its short-haul flights. But Air Canada involved in this bid would have a line of sight on exactly kind of how the rail competitor for its business would be unfolding. The timelines for this are very important. What we heard was that this next phase, this development phase, is going to be for the next 4 to 5 years or so. So for people eager to kind of ride a train like this in the near future, that will not be happening. 4 or 5 years of development puts us into the 2030s, and then you start building the thing. Some 1,000 kilometers of what they say will be an electrified train track, but one that they believe will be beneficial to Canada's economy, improve productivity, and of course address long-standing issues with rail and transportation infrastructure generally in this country. Here is the Transport Minister, Anita, Anand.
The Toronto to Quebec City corridor is a cornerstone of Canada's economic development. Nearly half of our nation's population lives here, and the existing transportation network has not kept pace with our historic population and economic growth. We expect to lay approximately 1,000 kilometers of dedicated track, allowing much faster travel times.
So, of course, the intention here is to address a climate challenge. Obviously, if it is electrified, this new system that is better for emissions than car travel or plane travel. But also some technological issues will remain to be addressed. If you have followed, for example, the LRT saga in Ottawa, you know that electric trains in Canadian weather conditions, be it ice, snow, or extreme heat, that's going to be challenging engineering-wise. Also, we don't have a final route. They have given us cities, but not exact kind of paths. There will be consultations, not just with private landowners, but with First Nations, going north of Toronto up through Peterborough. That would be making, not necessarily, there is a railway line there, but Certainly this would be bigger, wider. Would it exactly go in the current land? It's not clear. Different First Nations would need to be consulted. A lot of environmental regulatory hurdles to be addressed over the next few years. And historically, Canada has struggled to do these processes quickly. So that will be a space to watch at a time when a lot of people feel that getting this infrastructure in place is really urgent.
And we were listening there to the Transportation Minister, and they mentioned that contract with Cadence, that private-public partnership, is expected to be signed in the coming days or weeks. We're in an election year. How could this project be affected then by the possibility, and we saw a question asked about this, the possibility about a new government?
Indeed, because we know that the sort of two main players on that stage, Anita Anand and Justin Trudeau himself, not running again. We could be weeks away from entering a caretaker kind of mode as far as the federal government is concerned. And yet this contract setting a path for a very ambitious thing, nation building wise, about to be signed as they're on their way out the door. Trudeau was asked about this. Here's what he said.
High-speed rail in this country was always going to be a project that would be take long enough to build that it would cover multiple governments at all different orders of government, from municipal to provincial to federal. And it takes a will and a determination by a government to move forward and lock in this project.
This development phase, the price tag for it is $3.9 billion. In and of itself, not a budget-busting amount over 4 or 5 years, but does come in a context when a lot of people are talking about needing to keep budgets balanced. Even, for example, leadership contenders who have talked about keeping your economic powder dry through some rough years in the near future, balancing the budget over the lifespan of the next parliament, perhaps. Mark Carney has talked about the need to sort of fix the books in a different way than perhaps the Conservatives are intent on fixing the books. Pierre Poilievre has signaled any new spending would require equivalent of spending in cuts. So would the Conservatives want to be implementing this new project? Would this also be their vision? We know that in the past, at a policy convention, Conservatives have voted in favor of the idea of high-speed rail. Would they be on board for something that ultimately could cost $80 to $100 billion, though? That is a lot of cuts to pay for something like that. And yet, if this contract is signed before Trudeau and Anand are out the door, it is something that could cost a future government money to get out of. So this is going to be something to watch.
And we also know, of course, we're watching the tariff situation, and materials being used to build this would include steel and aluminum. So how does that play into what, of course, we're contending with right now with the United States?
Well, because of the timelines, it's not really clear that this would really be a fix for that at all in the short or medium term. Those industries are in line to maybe experience some acute pain over the next few years, while this project is just in the development stages. But there's a bigger principle here, and I took note in the news conference of people talking about buying Canadian aluminum and steel and supporting these industries long term. And of course, if you're talking about the future of a mill or a smelter, you're upgrading it, you're not doing it on a 3, 4, 5 year timeline horizon. You're planning over decades to be in something for the long haul. So knowing that a project like this is coming is maybe a reason for optimism on the sort of infrastructure building front. On the other hand, if you are a taxpayer looking at major infrastructure projects and you're going to take a total buy Canadian approach to it, that is something that sometimes increases costs. That is why when you negotiate international free trade agreements, you often make procurement, liberalization of procurement contracts, part of that, because you want to get the best value for the taxpayer buck. But we are in a different phase now, a very protectionist phase in terms of world trade. So as these governments take on big infrastructure ambitions like this, the price tag for them ultimately could be higher if the determination is to make this, 51,000 jobs all Canadian materials, and so on. This may be the new reality for anyone who would seek to build an ambitious rail corridor like this.
Thanks for the latest on this, Janice. That is the CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa.